A road trip is supposed to be fun, filled with laughter, music, and adventure. But sometimes the road leads to something far more sinister. Encounters that leave people questioning reality, fearing the unknown, and sometimes never making it back. Story 1. The road less traveled. The rain had started an hour ago, a steady drizzle that quickly turned into a downpour. The windshield wipers of Jake's old sedan worked overtime, struggling to keep up with the torrents of water cascading down the glass. Inside the car, the atmosphere was a mix of exhaustion and unease. Emma sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, while Sarah dozed in the back, her head resting against the window. "I told you we should have left earlier," Emma said, breaking the silence. "Now we're stuck in the middle of nowhere in this storm." Jake sighed, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Yeah, well, hindsight's 20/20ths, isn't it? Besides, it's not like we could have predicted this weather." Emma didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the dark road ahead. The headlights cut through the rain, illuminating the endless stretch of highway. Trees loomed on either side, their branches swaying ominously in the wind. It felt like they were the only people left in the world, driving through a void of darkness and rain. Sarah stirred in the back seat, yawning. "Are we almost there?" "Another hour or so," Jake replied, glancing at the GPS. "If this rain lets up, that is." As if on cue, the rain intensified, pounding against the roof of the car like 1,000 tiny fists. Emma shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. There was something about the storm that felt unnatural. It wasn't just the rain or the wind. It was the way the darkness seemed to press in on them, suffocating and alive. "Jake," Emma said suddenly, her voice low. "Do you see that?" Jake squinted through the windshield. "See what?" "There's someone on the side of the road." Jake slowed the car, his heart rate picking up. Sure enough, a figure stood on the shoulder of the road, barely visible through the rain. It was a woman, dressed in a white dress that clung to her body, soaked through. Her hair was plastered to her face, and she looked lost, her eyes wide and pleading. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, pulling over. "What's she doing out here in this weather?" "We can't just leave her," Sarah said, now fully awake. "She'll freeze to death." Jake hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to drive away. But Emma was already rolling down her window, the cold rain spraying into the car. "Are you okay?" Emma called out to the woman. The woman stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. Up close, she looked even more unsettling. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were hollow, as if all the life had been drained from them. "Can you take me home?" the woman asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm lost." Emma glanced at Jake, who nodded reluctantly. "Get in," he said, unlocking the doors. The woman climbed into the back seat, her presence sending a chill through the car. Sarah scooted over, trying to put as much distance between herself and the stranger as possible. The woman didn't seem to notice. She just stared out the window, her expression blank. "Where do you live?" Jake asked, his voice tense. The woman gave an address, her tone flat and emotionless. Jake entered it into the GPS, his hands trembling slightly. The house was only a few miles away, but the drive felt like an eternity. The rain continued to pour, the wind howling like a wounded animal. No one spoke, the silence in the car heavy and oppressive. Emma kept glancing at the woman in the rearview mirror, her unease growing with each passing minute. There was something wrong with her, something that went beyond her disheveled appearance. It was in the way she didn't blink, the way her breath didn't fog up the window despite the cold. Finally, they arrived at the address. It was an old, dilapidated house, its windows dark and its paint peeling. The yard was overgrown, and a rusty mailbox leaned precariously to one side. "We're here," Jake said, turning to the woman. But the back seat was empty. "What the—" Jake's voice broke off as he stared at the empty seat. "Where did she go?" Emma and Sarah exchanged horrified glances. They'd all seen the woman get into the car. They'd all heard her speak. But now she was gone, as if she had never been there at all. "Maybe she got out while we weren't looking," Sarah suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. "In this rain, without us noticing?" Emma shook her head. "No way." Jake got out of the car, the rain soaking him instantly. He looked around, but there was no sign of the woman. The only sound was the rain and the wind, the only light coming from the car's headlights. "Let's just go," Emma said, her voice trembling. "This place gives me the creeps." But Jake was already walking toward the house. "We can't just leave. What if she's in trouble?" Reluctantly, Emma and Sarah followed him, their shoes squelching in the mud. The porch steps creaked under their weight, and the door groaned as Jake knocked on it. After a moment, the door opened, revealing an elderly man. He looked frail, his face lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and piercing. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice raspy. Jake explained what had happened, his words tumbling out in a rush. The man listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. "What did she look like?" he asked finally. Emma described the woman, the white dress, the pale face, the hollow eyes. The man's hands trembled as he spoke. "That was my daughter, Clara. She died in a car accident on this road 10 years ago. You're not the first to see her. She's been trying to come home ever since." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, and she instinctively stepped closer to Jake. We didn't know," Jake stammered. "We just wanted to help." The man nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow. "You did what you thought was right. But now, you've drawn her attention, and once she's noticed you, she won't let go." Story 2. The gas station, stalker, the lonely road. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a barren wasteland of sand and scrub under a moonless sky. Jake tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his eyes heavy from hours of driving. The radio had long since faded to static, and his phone had no signal. He was alone, utterly alone, in the middle of nowhere. The gas station appeared like a mirage, its flickering neon sign casting an unnatural glow over the cracked pavement. Jake hesitated for a moment, his instincts warning him to keep driving, but the needle on his fuel gauge was dangerously close to empty, and he had no choice. He pulled into the station, the tires crunching over gravel. The place was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. As he stepped out of the car, the wind howled, carrying with it a faint metallic smell that made his stomach churn. He shook it off, blaming it on exhaustion, and walked inside. The bell above the door jingled, announcing his arrival. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged cashier with greasy hair and a worn-out uniform. His eyes locked onto Jake's the moment he entered, and he didn't look away. Jake grabbed a bottle of water and a bag of chips, trying to ignore the cashier's unnerving stare. When he approached the counter to pay, the man leaned in closer than necessary, his breath smelling of stale cigarettes. "Long drive," the cashier asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Yeah," Jake replied, forcing a smile. "Just passing through." The cashier's eyes darted to the window, then back to Jake. His hands trembled slightly as he handed over the change. "You should be careful out here," he muttered. "Strange things happen on these roads." Jake chuckled nervously, unsure if the man was joking or genuinely warning him. But before he could respond, the cashier's expression changed. His face went pale, and his eyes widened in fear. He leaned even closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Come to the back with me. You're in danger." Jake froze. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process what was happening. The cashier's eyes were pleading, desperate. "Now, trust me," the man urged, his voice trembling. Against his better judgment, Jake nodded. The cashier motioned for him to follow and led him through a door marked "Employees Only." The room was small and cluttered, filled with boxes and cleaning supplies. The cashier locked the door behind them and gestured to a small, grimy window overlooking the parking lot. "Look," the cashier whispered, pointing to Jake's car. Jake's blood ran cold. Beneath his car, a shadowy figure was crawling out from underneath. The man stood slowly, his movements deliberate and predatory. In his hand, he clutched a knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he realized what had almost happened. The stranger had been waiting for him, hiding under his car, ready to strike the moment he left the station. Who is that?" Jake stammered, his voice barely audible. The cashier shook his head. "I don't know, but he's been here before. He waits, he watches, and when he finds the right person..." He trailed off, his eyes filled with dread. Jake's mind raced. He had to get out of there. But how? The man outside was between him and his car, and the gas station was miles from anywhere. He turned to the cashier, his voice shaking. "What do we do?" The cashier's expression darkened. "We wait, and we hope he leaves." Story 3. The phantom car that wouldn't stop following. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty highway. Sarah leaned her head against the window of the car, watching the blur of trees and telephone poles whiz by. Beside her, her boyfriend Mark tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, humming along to the radio. They'd been driving for hours, and the monotony of the road was starting to wear on both of them. "How much longer?" Sarah asked, stifling a yawn. Mark glanced at the GPS on the dashboard. "Another 2 hours, maybe. We'll stop for food soon, okay?" Sarah nodded, her eyes drifting to the rearview mirror. That's when she saw it. A beat-up truck, its headlights glaring in the fading light. It was far enough behind them that she hadn't noticed it before, but something about it made her uneasy. "That truck's been following us for a while," she said, her voice tinged with unease. Mark glanced in the mirror and shrugged. "It's a highway. People drive on it." Sarah frowned. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The truck maintained a steady distance, neither gaining nor falling behind. Every time she looked back, it was there, its headlights like unblinking eyes. An hour passed and the truck was still behind them. Sarah's unease grew into full-blown anxiety. "Mark, it's still there. Don't you think that's weird?" Mark sighed, clearly annoyed. "It's probably just someone heading in the same direction." "Relax, Sarah." But Sarah couldn't relax. She kept glancing in the mirror, her heart racing every time she saw the truck's headlights. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Pull over at the next gas station, please." Mark hesitated, but eventually nodded. "Fine, but you're being paranoid." The gas station was a small, run-down building on the side of the highway. Its flickering neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. Mark pulled up to a pump and turned off the engine. Sarah immediately looked in the rearview mirror. The truck was still there. It pulled into the lot and parked a few spaces away. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, with a scruffy beard and a worn leather jacket. He glanced in their direction, and for a moment, their eyes met. Sarah's stomach churned. "Mark, let's go inside. Now." Mark rolled his eyes but followed her into the gas station. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, and the cashier, a bored-looking teenager, barely glanced up from his phone. Sarah pretended to browse the shelves, her eyes darting to the window every few seconds. The man from the truck was still outside, leaning against his vehicle and smoking a cigarette. He seemed to be staring right at her. "Can we just pay and go?" Mark asked, clearly impatient. Sarah nodded, but as they approached the counter, the man from the truck walked in. The bell jingled again and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching them. Mark turned to him, his voice firm. "Can we help you?" The man didn't respond. Instead, his eyes widened in fear, and he took a step back. Then, without a word, he turned and bolted out the door, jumping into his truck and speeding away. Sarah and Mark exchanged confused glances. "What the hell was that?" Mark muttered. Sarah didn't answer. She was too busy staring at the reflection in the gas station's window. In the back seat of their car, barely visible in the dim light, was the shadowy figure of a man. Story 4. The desert motel that shouldn't exist. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of sand and scrub under a blazing sun. The heat shimmered on the horizon, distorting the landscape into a mirage of illusions. Inside the car, the air conditioning struggled to keep up, and the mood was tense. 4 college friends, Emma, Jake, Mia, and Ryan, had set out on a road trip for what was supposed to be a fun adventure. But now, hours off course and running low on gas, the adventure had turned into a nightmare. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with frustration. She was squinting at the GPS on her phone, which had lost signal miles ago. Jake, who was driving, shot her an annoyed look. "I'm following the map. It's not my fault we're in the middle of nowhere." "Guys, can we not fight right now?" Mia interjected from the back seat. She was leaning against the window, her face pale from the heat. "We need to find gas, like ASAP." Ryan, sitting beside her, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, unless you want to push this car through the desert. We need to figure something out." As if on cue, the car sputtered, and the fuel light blinked ominously. Jake cursed under his breath. "Great, just great." They drove in silence for a few more minutes, the tension thick in the air. Then, just as hope seemed lost, Emma pointed ahead. "Look, is that a motel?" In the distance, a small building emerged from the heat haze. It was an old-fashioned motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign and a row of doors facing the parking lot. The sign read, "Desert Oasis Motel," though the letters were faded and some of the bulbs were out. "Thank God," Jake muttered, steering the car toward the motel. "Let's just hope they have gas." The parking lot was empty, save for a single dusty pickup truck parked near the office. The motel itself looked like it had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the windows were cracked, and the whole place had an air of neglect. But at this point, The group wasn't in a position to be picky. They stepped out of the car, the heat hitting them like a wall. The air was dry and heavy, and the silence was unnerving. No birds, no wind, just the faint hum of the neon sign. "This place gives me the creeps," Mia whispered as they approached the office. "It's fine," Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. "We'll just get a room, figure out the gas situation, and leave first thing in the morning." The office was dimly lit, with a ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. Behind the counter stood an elderly man with a stooped posture and a blank expression. He didn't greet them, just stared as they approached. "Hi," Emma said, forcing a smile. "We need a room for the night. And, do you have gas?" The man didn't respond right away. He just continued to stare, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Finally, he reached under the counter and slid a key across the desk. "Room 7, he said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. Emma exchanged the uneasy glance with the others. "Okay, thanks. And the gas?" The man didn't answer. He just turned and shuffled into a back room, leaving them standing there in awkward silence. "Weird," Ryan muttered, "but whatever. Let's just get to the room and figure it out from there." Room 7 was at the far end of the motel, its door cracking loudly as Jake pushed it open. The inside was just as run down as the exterior. The carpet was stained, the furniture was outdated, and the air smelled musty and old. "Charming," Mia said sarcastically, dropping her bag on the bed. "I give it 5 stars. "It's just for one night," Jake reminded her. "We'll survive." As the sun set, the group tried to make the best of the situation. They ordered pizza from a place the motel clerk had recommended, though the delivery guy seemed just as strange as the clerk. He barely spoke, just handed over the pizza and left without a word. By the time night fell, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The silence outside was oppressive, and the motel felt like it was holding its breath. Emma tried to shake off the unease, but it was hard to ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Around midnight, she woke up to the sound of footsteps outside. At first, she thought it was one of her friends, but when she peeked out the window, her blood ran cold. The parking lot was empty. Their car was gone. Story 5. The Woman in the Woods. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through dense forests and rolling hills. It was the kind of road trip that was supposed to be fun. 2 friends, a playlist of their favorite songs, and the open road. But for Clara and Sam, the mood had shifted somewhere around the 3rd hour. The trees seemed to close in around them, their shadows stretching long and dark as the sun dipped lower in the sky. "I think we're lost," Clara said, squinting at the map on her phone. The GPS had stopped working miles ago, and the signal bars on her phone were non-existent. Sam, who was driving, shrugged. "We're not lost, we're just exploring." Clara rolled her eyes. "Exploring? Sam, we haven't seen another car in over an hour. This is the definition of lost." Sam grinned, clearly enjoying her frustration. "Relax, Clara. It's an adventure. Besides, look at this place. It's beautiful." Clara couldn't argue with that. The forest was stunning, with towering trees and sunlight filtering through the leaves in golden beams. But there was something about it that made her uneasy. The silence was too heavy, the air too still. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. "Let's just pull over for a minute," Sam said, slowing the car. "I need to stretch my legs." Clara hesitated but nodded. They hadn't seen a rest stop in hours, and her legs were starting to cramp. Sam pulled the car onto the shoulder, and they stepped out into the cool, damp air. The forest was even more imposing up close. The trees seemed to loom over them, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Clara shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "Come on," Sam said, already heading toward the tree line. "Let's see what's in there." "Sam, I don't think that's a good idea," Clara called after him, but he was already disappearing into the trees. With a sigh, she followed, her unease growing with every step. The woods were darker than they'd seemed from the road, the canopy overhead blocking out most of the sunlight. The ground was soft and damp, covered in a thick layer of moss and fallen leaves. Clara kept close to Sam, her eyes darting around nervously. "Isn't this amazing?" Sam said, his voice echoing strangely in the stillness. "It's like we're the only people in the world." Clara didn't answer. She was too busy scanning the trees, her heart pounding in her chest. Something felt wrong, deeply, unnervingly wrong. And then she saw her. Deep in the trees, standing perfectly still, was an old woman. She was dressed in tattered clothes, her hair long and unkempt. Her eyes were fixed on them, unblinking and unnervingly intense. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Sam," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "Do you see that?" Sam followed her gaze and stiffened. "Yeah, I see her." The woman didn't move. She just stood there, staring at them with those piercing eyes. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. There was something unnatural about the woman, something that made her skin crawl. "Let's go," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Now." Sam didn't argue. They turned and hurried back toward the car, their footsteps crunching loudly in the silence. Clara kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting the woman to be following them, but she wasn't. She was still standing there, watching them with that same unnerving stare. When they reached the car, Clara practically jumped inside, slamming the door shut behind her. Sam started the engine and pulled back onto the road, driving faster than he should have. "What the hell was that?" Clara asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Sam said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, "but I don't want to find out." They drove in silence for a while, the tension in the car palpable. Eventually, Clara pulled out her phone and started scrolling through the photos she'd taken earlier. She needed something to distract herself, something to take her mind off the woman in the woods. And then she saw it. In one of the photos, taken before they'd even entered the woods, the woman was there. She was standing among the trees, her eyes fixed on the camera, watching them. Clara's blood ran cold. "Sam," she whispered, holding up the phone. "Look at this." Sam glanced at the photo and went pale. "That's not possible. We didn't even see her until we were in the woods." "I know," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But she was there. She was watching us the whole time."